Good morning, everyone. From the moment we're born, we are handed a narrative. Family is everything. Family is unconditional. Family will always be there for you. It's whispered in lullabies, reinforced in children's books, romanticized in movies. It's the glue we're told, the roots we can always return to. And for some, that might be true. But for many, more than we admit out loud, this story quickly starts to unravel. What happens when the place that's supposed to be your safest harbor is where the storm begins? We're taught not to question this myth. To speak ill of your family is seen as betrayal in itself. If you share the same last name or bloodline, then love and loyalty are supposed to follow. So when you feel pain, rejection, or neglect inside your own home, the first thing you question isn't them, it's you. That's the cruel twist of the myth. It doesn't just set up false expectations about family, it teaches us to doubt our own pain when those expectations aren't met. Many people go through their lives carrying a silent grief, mourning a family they never really had, not because they lost someone physically, but because they were never seen, never nurtured, or never emotionally safe in the first place. And yet, they still smile in holiday photos. They still show up, still stay quiet. Why? Because the story of the perfect family is stronger than the truth. And because we're often told that loyalty to family means swallowing our own wounds. But real love, real belonging doesn't require you to shrink, silence yourself, or keep peace at the cost of your mental health. When we finally allow ourselves to confront that, we begin to untangle the difference between connection and obligation. Just because someone raised you doesn't mean they nurtured you. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they deserve access to your soul. This myth is particularly cruel because it isolates people in their suffering. It convinces them they are alone in what they feel, but you are not alone. So many people carry this same ache behind closed doors. The truth is, a family can look perfect on the outside and still be emotionally unsafe on the inside. Appearances have never been proof of love, and silence has never been proof of peace. Breaking away from this myth doesn't mean you hate your family. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you are brave enough to tell the truth to yourself first, and maybe eventually out loud. It means you're choosing emotional honesty over performance. It means you are choosing to see clearly, even if it's painful, and clarity, even when it hurts, is the first step to healing. The moment you stop trying to force yourself to fit into the perfect family story is the moment you begin to reclaim your voice. And when you do that, something powerful happens. You realize you're not broken. The story was. You stop chasing approval from people who were never capable of giving you what you needed. You begin to build boundaries, not as walls, but as invitations to healthier forms of love, even if they don't come from the people who raised you. Letting go of the myth makes room for truth, and truth, no matter how messy or complicated, is always a more fertile ground for love, for healing, and for a life that feels like yours. The myth told you that family is everything. The truth, belonging is everything. And sometimes you have to walk away from the place you were born to find the place where you truly belong. Betrayal by someone close, especially a parent, a sibling, or someone you called family, is one of the deepest wounds a person can carry. It feels personal because it is personal. These are the people who were supposed to know you best. They saw you at your most vulnerable, and still they chose to turn away, diminish you, hurt you, or ignore your pain. It's no wonder so many internalize that experience as proof that they weren't enough, not lovable enough, not obedient enough, not worthy enough. But that's not the truth. That's just the story shame likes to tell. The truth is, betrayal is rarely about you, it's about them. Their fears, their emotional immaturity, their unresolved trauma, their inability to hold space for your truth without it threatening their own. When people betray you, especially family, it reflects where they are limited, not where you are lacking. But because we crave love and connection so deeply, especially from our caregivers, we often turn their failures inward. We mistake their silence for our fault, their cruelty for our unworthiness. Think about it this way. If someone can't swim and you ask them to dive into deep water with you, they'll flail, they'll panic. And if they're afraid enough, they might even pull you under, not because you asked too much, but because they couldn't handle it. Emotional betrayal works the same way. You didn't ask for too much by needing to be loved, seen, protected, or heard. You were simply asking someone who never learned how to swim emotionally to hold you safely, and they couldn't. This is where the mirror comes in. Betrayal reflects back to you where the other person is stuck. It shows you what they're unwilling or unable to face. Sometimes they project their own shame onto you. Sometimes they gaslight or minimize you because your truth threatens the version of themselves they're clinging to. That has nothing to do with your character. That is not a comment on your worth. That is a mirror showing you the emotional limits of the people you trusted. One of the most important shifts in healing from family betrayal is learning how to separate your identity from their behavior. Your parents not showing up for you emotionally doesn't mean you were too much. It means they didn't have the tools. A sibling turning on you doesn't mean you're inherently unlovable. It might mean they were enmeshed in dynamics they didn't know how to break. It still hurts, but the hurt becomes lighter when you stop carrying their failures as if they were your flaws. This doesn't mean you excuse the harm. Naming limitations isn't about justification. It's about liberation. It's about freeing yourself from the story that you were the problem. When you let go of that story, you begin to see the betrayal more clearly. You stop asking, why wasn't I enough? And start asking, why were they so afraid of seeing me? You stop asking, what did I do wrong? And begin to ask, what parts of them were never healed enough to love me right? This shift is not just cognitive, it's emotional. It takes time. It's a rewiring of how you see yourself, especially if you were raised in a family that made you feel like your needs were burdens, your emotions were messy, or your voice was too loud. But every time you remind yourself that betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed, you reclaim a little piece of your worth. And that's the slow, sacred work of healing, remembering who you were before they taught you to doubt your value. You are not broken because they couldn't show up. You are not unworthy because they chose silence or cruelty. Their betrayal was never a reflection of your value, only a mirror showing you their limits. And the most powerful thing you can do now is break that mirror, walk away, and begin the lifelong journey of seeing yourself clearly, not through their lens, but through your own truth. In every family system, there are roles, spoken or unspoken. The responsible one, the rebel, the caretaker, the golden child, the scapegoat. These identities are often formed early, and most of the time, we don't get to choose them. They are assigned to us, shaped by our parents' wounds, their expectations, and the dynamics they inherited from their own upbringing. Before we even understand who we are, we're already being told, directly or indirectly, who we're allowed to be. And the problem is, these roles often have very little to do with who you actually are. Maybe you were the one who always held the peace because conflict felt unsafe. Maybe you were labeled difficult simply because you asked hard questions. Maybe you were expected to stay small so someone else could shine. Over time, these roles start to shape your sense of self. You begin to believe that being lovable means being compliant, that being worthy means not making waves, that being accepted means staying silent. But something happens when we begin to wake up, when we begin to ask ourselves, what if I'm not who they told me I was? That moment, that quiet rebellion, is the start of liberation. It's also the moment when betrayal often shows up. Because when you begin to step outside the role you've always played, the people who depended on that version of you may not know how to respond. Your growth becomes threatening. Your authenticity becomes disruptive. This isn't because you've done something wrong. It's because the family system you were in was built around a certain structure. And you stepping outside that structure feels like a crack in the foundation. If you were always the caretaker, then choosing yourself might feel like abandonment to them. But here's what's true. Telling the truth about who you are is not betrayal. Living a lie to protect someone else's comfort. The heartbreak comes when we realize that some family members loved the version of us that didn't challenge them, not the whole growing complex person we're becoming. That's a different kind of grief. It's the grief of being loved conditionally. It's realizing that what looked like love might have actually been control or codependence or comfort. That doesn't mean it was all fake. It just means it wasn't whole. And wholeness is what you deserve. When people say you've changed, they often mean you're no longer playing the role I needed you to play, so I didn't have to face myself. That's not your burden to carry. It never was. The moment you begin to reclaim your identity, your voice, your boundaries, your autonomy, you're not breaking the family, you're breaking the pattern. And that takes more courage than most people realize. But the fallout from that courage can be painful. You may be met with guilt trips, gaslighting, or distance. You may even be cut off, and that hurts. But the pain of rejection will never run deeper than the pain of abandoning yourself. Every time you choose authenticity over performance, you build a life that actually fits. A life where you're not just playing a part, you're fully living in your truth. The role you were assigned is not your destiny. It was a survival strategy for them and maybe for you too, but you're allowed to outgrow it. You're allowed to become the version of yourself that doesn't need to perform to be loved. And if that threatens the people around you, let it. Because real love will never require you to stay small. Real love doesn't demand a role. It welcomes your whole self. There's a quiet force that keeps people bound to painful family dynamics, and it's not just fear, it's shame. Shame is subtle. It doesn't yell, it whispers. It tells you to keep your voice down, to protect the image of the family, to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. It says, if you were stronger, kinder, better, this wouldn't be happening. And that's how it wins, by convincing you that your pain is your fault. Silence becomes a survival tactic. You don't speak up because the moment you do, you risk being labeled the problem, the dramatic one, the ungrateful one, the difficult child. And when you've spent your whole life trying to belong, to be accepted and loved, being seen as the problem is terrifying. So instead of naming the hurt, you bury it. You play along. You pretend things are okay, even when they're not, because silence feels safer than shame. But here's the truth. Shame is not a reflection of who you are. It's a byproduct of an unhealthy system. In families where emotional honesty is punished or avoided, silence is the currency. Don't talk about the drinking. Don't mention the anger. Don't bring up the favoritism, the emotional neglect, the way you are made to feel invisible. And if you do, there's often backlash. You'll be told you're making things up, being too sensitive, or trying to ruin the family. That's not love, that's control. The real betrayal isn't the truth you speak, it's the silence you were forced into. Because silence keeps the cycle intact. It protects the status quo. And the cost of that silence is high. It shows up in anxiety, in self-doubt, in broken relationships, in unresolved grief. It shows up in the way you second guess your own emotions or feel guilt for having boundaries, or wonder if you're allowed to be upset. That's what generational shame does. It gets passed down until someone is brave enough to break it. Being that person, the cycle breaker, is no small task. It's lonely work. It requires you to name what others have denied. It means refusing to carry secrets that were never yours to hold. It means learning how to sit with discomfort, both your own and that of others, when the truth finally comes to the surface. But here's what's powerful. Every time you break your silence, you chip away at the shame. You make space for healing. Not just for you, but for the generations after you. People often confuse silence with strength. They think not talking about something means you've moved on. But silence isn't healing, it's hiding. And healing can't happen in the dark. Healing needs air, it needs voice, it needs honesty. Speaking the truth isn't about vengeance or blame, it's about liberation. You are not weak for naming your wounds. You are brave because you're doing what others couldn't or wouldn't. You don't have to tell your story to everyone, but you owe it to yourself not to keep lying to you. The shame you feel doesn't belong to you. It came from a system that couldn't hold your truth, and your silence didn't protect anyone. It only prolonged the pain. So give yourself permission to speak, even if your voice shakes, even if you're the only one telling the truth, even if they never acknowledge it. Speaking your truth is not about getting validation from them. It's about freeing you. The moment you stop letting shame and silence dictate your story, everything changes. You stop living for appearances and start living for truth. You begin to feel the ground under your feet. You learn that you were never too much. You were just too real for a system built on denial. And that realization is everything, because once shame loses its grip, your voice returns, and with it comes power, clarity, and the first true breath of freedom. There comes a point in healing when the question shifts from why didn't they love me the way I needed to what do I want love to look like moving forward. That's the turning point. That's when you realize you don't have to keep chasing love from people who only offer it with conditions. You don't have to keep showing up to places where your truth is too loud, your needs are too inconvenient, or your boundaries are seen as betrayal. You get to redefine what family means, not based on blood, but on mutual respect, safety, and emotional reciprocity. We grow up being told that family is forever, that no matter what, you stick by them. But what's often left out is the cost of that loyalty when it's one-sided or toxic. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and even for them is to create space. Distance isn't always abandonment. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's a boundary that says, I love you, but not like this. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about preservation. They say, this is what I will and won't allow in my life. They help you stop bleeding for people who won't even acknowledge the wound. And for many of us, setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things we'll ever do because it feels like we're breaking a sacred rule. But here's the truth. The rule was never sacred, it was inherited, and not all inheritance is worth keeping. You don't owe anyone access to you simply because of shared history. Access is a privilege, not a birthright. If someone constantly harms you, dismisses your boundaries, or refuses to meet you in a place of honesty, you're allowed to pull back. That might mean fewer phone calls, less emotional vulnerability, or even complete distance. It might mean redefining holidays, rituals, or roles you used to fill. It's not easy, it's deeply painful, but it's often necessary for real healing to begin. When you start to build boundaries, people will test them. Some will try to guilt you, others will accuse you of being cold, selfish, or ungrateful. That's part of the process because when you stop playing your old role, you disrupt the script everyone was comfortable with. But comfort isn't the same as love, and guilt isn't the same as connection. If someone's love depends on your silence, your submission, or your pain, that's not love. That's control. What's beautiful, though, is that on the other side of boundaries is freedom, emotional freedom, the kind that lets you breathe again, the kind that lets you surround yourself with people who see all of you, not just the version that makes them feel safe. You begin to build a chosen family, one that doesn't ask you to shrink, to perform, or to prove your worth. A family where love is not currency, it's presence, safety, and truth. Redefining family doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to stop pretending. It means you value your peace more than their expectations. It means you're no longer willing to betray yourself just to belong. And over time, you learn that you can love people from afar. You can hold compassion for their pain and still say, I will not abandon myself to stay close to you. That's not rejection, that's integrity. Healing begins the moment you say no more, not with bitterness, but with strength, not to punish, but to protect. You get to choose who sits at your table. You get to choose whose voices shape your self-worth. And you get to say, family to me means love that feels safe, love that sees me, love that honors truth, not just tradition. That is the power of redefining family. That is the beginning of something real.